Laser, can you make it so we can change our name, or am I not looking at the right place? Thank you.
I just enabled it. We're actually live now.
Fred and Jim. And okay, I've got about 2 minutes on my watch. How are people doing?
Hey, David.
Okay. Well, let's see if I can get my email set up here. Drive. In fact,
Can't see.
311. So are people able to see what's on the Google Drive still? Are you able to see multiple files and everything? Good, good. Hey, Mike,
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can. Okay, it's 7:30. Laser, let us know when we're live.
We're live now.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Finance and Facilities Committee meeting. It's March 11th, 2021. Time's about 7:30 p.m. Let's start out with introductions. Lisa?
Lisa Raymond, Interim Assistant Superintendent for Business.
I'm David Warner, board member and chair of this committee. Ashley? Oh, excuse me, Amy.
It's okay. Amy Ashley Moore, I'm the district director.
Mona?
Mona Freytag, resident.
Chris?
Chris Fallon, parent of two.
Jim? James, you want to introduce yourself?
BBS architect, project architect for Greenberg Schools.
Fred?
Fred Seba from BBS Architects and Engineers.
Ashley?
Ashley Pineda, Board of Education trustee and parent of two.
Laser?
Laser alert, network administrator.
Heather?
Heather Gordon, Facilities Secretary.
Whoever's behind the GCSD panel.
It must be me. 'Cause
Oh.
it's Michael Falcone, Director of Facilities and Operations.
Deb?
Debbie Dionne, resident.
And Denise? Denise? All right. Jessica?
I am sorry, David. It's
Okay.
Denise Alamo, parent of children in the district.
Good, good. Jessica?
Hi, Jessica Muldoon, parent of a child in the district.
Good. I got your email. You're going to have a chance to ask your question very soon. Okay. All right. Anybody I missed? Okay. So the main reason for this meeting is that we've been working towards our goal of getting out a completed recommendation of phase one of what's happening in terms of our facility project for the board meeting on the 16th. And we figured out that as part of bringing our school back to being fully open, that is for full-time in-person instruction as quickly as possible, when all the kids start to come back as we get past COVID, one of the things that we have to do is take some ECP children who are currently housed in Highview and who won't fit there anymore once all the regular Highview children return. And we have to take them back to the ECP main building. We had a ventilation plan to improve the ventilation of that building, but the time to complete that plan is a little further out than we'd like it to be, and therefore we have to have temporary ventilation the way we've done with RJ Bailey, and the heating system must be robust enough to keep everyone warm while they're well ventilated. So we asked BBS Architects to go back and take a good solid look at the heating system and any underlying related systems, including the electrical system, and tell us what needed to be done. And so that brings us to our first agenda item. And which of the which of you, Fred or Jim, wants to take it away?
Well, I was there yesterday, so, I'm familiar with the report and wrote the email. I don't know if, Jim, you have the ability to put that up on the screen? Maybe we can do screen sharing and, we can go through it quickly and I can just kind of summarize. I won't bore you with a lot of the details, but I spent about 3 hours in that building yesterday and, really spent a lot of time looking at the heating system, looking at the electrical system. There were some concerns brought up by Debbie, so I looked at those while I was there. Anything that was, would be considered, capital project related. There were a couple of things in there that, were not, so I did not address those, but really got to understand it. And I spent a lot of time with the one of the maintainers there, Leo, and who knows the building very well. And I also spoke to Michael while I was there, gave him a call, and Leo and I put him on speakerphone and we had a conversation with him too. So found out a lot of information. So I'm going to get started with the boiler room first. And it talks about what's there. You have a Wheel McLean Model 80 series cast iron sectional boiler. It's only about 3 or 4 years old. The old boiler, I guess, leaked or had cracked sections, something, I'm not sure, but was replaced 3 or 4 years ago. So the boiler plant is new. It's a single boiler. It's oil fired. It's got a Beckett oil fired burner on it. And it's in good shape. There was a leak down there on a valve, on a purge valve down there, which was dripping, which I let Michael know on the phone yesterday, just to get that taken care of. But basically, when you run the numbers, that boiler is more than big enough in order to be able to heat that building with or without fresh air. So if you figure maybe 25, 30 BTUs a square foot without fresh air, we only need 175,000 BTUs per hour to heat that building. And that boiler is good for between 450 and 550,000 BTU per hour. So the boiler is more than big enough, even if we start to introduce some fresh air, which I know you had talked about putting fans in the windows and or potentially opening the windows if it's real cold out a little bit to get some more fresh air in there. That boiler should have more than enough capacity in order to handle that. So what I discovered is that, when I was down in the boiler room, I was able to check the circulators. So there's one circulator, there's a zone for each of the classrooms. I shouldn't say that. Classrooms 3 and 4, I think, are on one zone. The office area down at the end is on another zone. Classroom 1 is on a third zone and classroom 2 is on a fourth zone. So they each have their own thermostats in there. But what I found was that the boiler was at about 190 degrees, which was great. It wasn't that cold yesterday. If you remember, it was actually kind of a nice day. It was between 50 and 55 degrees. So the boiler was at about 190 degrees. But what I discovered was that the circulators bringing water back from those zones, the lines were at about body temperature. They were about 90 to 100 degrees. That should not be happening, especially on a warm day like that. There shouldn't be more than probably a 20 or 30 degree difference in temperature, delta T, between the supply temperature and the return air temperature. So it made me believe that there's a flow issue in that building. So the water is not getting out and getting around that building and then getting back to the boiler. It's losing all of its heat because it's not moving through the piping system quickly enough. It's sitting in the piping system for way too long, and it's giving up all of its heat, which it's not supposed to be doing. The other thing that made me think that was that as I stood in the boiler room, and I was down there for probably 10 or 15 minutes, the boiler cycled on a couple of different times, but it came on for a very short period of time and then shut back off. So it's called short cycling. And that would indicate the same thing. If we're using the heat out of that and there's a good flow, then that boiler will stay on for a much longer period of time. But it was not doing that. So the first thing that we believe is that there's a flow issue in there, and it could be a couple of different things. It could be that the pumps are undersized, which we kind of think that might be it. There could be air in the system, and I know the district has many times tried to purge the air out of the system to get the heat working. There could be sludge in some of the piping, so we're not 100% sure why there is a flow problem, but there's definitely a flow problem there. So that was basically what we kind of discovered down in the boiler room. So the second paragraph talks about our recommendations. So the first thing we recommend is that we need to get some more information on the circulators and run some calculations, but we believe there's not enough head pressure on the circulators. So, there's enough gallons per minute, but the piping is long enough and there's enough elbows in there, there's resistance against that. It's called head. And we believe that the pumps are not sized with enough head pressure to overcome the head pressure in the piping. The piping is relatively small. It's 3/4 inch diameter that runs through the fin tubes. So we're going to run some more calcs, but we believe that those circulators are undersized. The other things that we noticed in the boiler room, the boiler, I don't want to say it's piped backwards, but normally the circulator pumps are on the supply side of the boiler. In that building, it's piped, I'll call it like an old-fashioned way. They used to do it that way many years ago. We don't pipe boilers that way any longer, but the boiler piping has been there for a long time, so it was left in that configuration. And there are several reasons why you don't want the circulator pumps on the return, but that's where they are. So we recommend that the near boiler piping be modified so that we can change that. We recommend that a air eliminator be installed, an air separator, to make sure we remove any of the excess air in the system to make sure it's not that. There's an older expansion tank in there, so we're recommending replacement of the expansion tank. So basically, and the other thing that we're recommending is increasing the pressure in the system. If you boost the pressure a little bit, it's about 15 PSI now. If you boost the pressure a little bit, it makes it a little bit easier for the circulators to move water around. So those are the things that we're recommending in there, and we provide an estimated cost, a fully loaded cost, so this is including all contingencies and fees, of about $40,000. So the construction cost out of that would be about $30,000, and then you would have contingencies and fees on top of that. So that's the first item that we're recommending be done. Okay. The second item that we're recommending be looked at, and this could be something that could be done as like a phase 2, and I'll explain in a second. So you have hot water baseboard radiation throughout that building and cast iron radiators in classroom 1. And when you go around and you feel the pipe that comes into and out of a section of baseboard, it's hot. But then when you feel the baseboard itself, it's lukewarm. So we're not getting heat transfer out of that baseboard radiation. And it's an older slant fin type that's a manufacturer, residential type baseboard, and it's only 3/4 inch. So one of the things that we think will also help is if we replace that baseboard and put in a commercial grade baseboard, with a larger borehole on it. So instead of 3/4 inch, go with 1 1/4 inch. That will increase flow through the baseboard radiation, and it will allow for better heat transfer. So Sterling makes a good one, commercial grade, that we have used a number of times in a number of different schools. I know Michael was concerned with the enclosure, that the enclosures get beat up. So the Sterling actually has a heavy duty enclosure. We've used that in school hallways and things that, where it'll take a fairly good beating. And then replacement of the cast iron radiators in classroom 1 with new convectors as well. So we put air vents on that. One thing I did notice is that there's a lot of equipment, shelving, contents of the building that are pushed up against the baseboard. So it's not really allowing it to function well. We need to get some air circulation through the bottom and out the top. So we would have to just make sure that that's clear after the work gets done. So that's basically it. Now, the cost of that is about $100,000, including all contingencies and fees. And the reason I say that that could be considered like a phase 2 is that we believe that the replacement of the pumps and the repiping of the boiler room should be able to get us more than enough heat in that building to offset the building load, as well as being able to open the windows and put a fan in, not when it's 10 degrees outside. Just like over at Bailey, you didn't do it when it's 10 degrees outside. You did open the windows, though. We should be able to more than offset that heat transfer. The baseboard is there. It does work. It's not leaking. It's just a little bit undersized, and it's not really putting off a lot of water. But that, we believe, is mainly due to the flow issue. So, if we're looking to get in there and do some work and get this building up and operational again at the least cost possible, then really I would say we start with the boiler work first. We do that and we see what happens. And then if we need to, then we move on to the baseboard. But we very well might not have to do the baseboard replacement piece of it.
David?
Yes.
Sorry. David, so if I'm understanding correctly, this is the kind of work that we could do now as a repair. There's no, this repairing the boiler, everything that he listed in that paragraph. It's not a capital project. It's not
a new system that wasn't existing before. It's
something we can begin as soon as, if anyone else needs to say yes, that's how soon it can begin, correct?
Are we correct?
I would say this would fit under, you talking about the repair reserve, or are you talking about taking it out of?
I'm talking about everything you mentioned in that paragraph that begins, we recommend that the circulators be replaced and everything to get that boiler up and running.
Now.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to verify what can happen now versus later. Thank you.
It could be done now, as we get out of the heating season. The
building is empty at the moment. We can do it.
Yeah, so that's up to you as far as if funding is available and we can bring contractors in. I'm sure you have contractors on local contracts up there that you deal with. I can talk to Michael and work with him, and we can bring one of those contractors in and have them do that work right now. Yeah.
So then how long would it take possibly to get that done?
I would say the piping around the boiler and everything, it would probably take 1 to 2 weeks to actually do the construction work. We would want to do some sizing on those pumps. We're going to have to guess at how the piping actually runs under the floor, because we're not 100% sure and there aren't any drawings available for that. And then run some head loss calculations and then select the pumps that will move that water around that building properly. So it's going to take us, a week or two to probably, do some sizing on that. It might take a week or two for the contractor to order the pumps, but as soon as the pumps come in, the contractor can get in there and start the work. And again, I would say a week or two probably for the contractor to finish that work. So we could be done within the next month and a half, I would say, with this work.
About 6 weeks from authorization. All right. Good. And if we had to go, and if we get done and we look and the BTUs coming out into the room are not what they should be, then this 100K thing down here where we do a replacement, Is that a bigger deal in terms of like ordering the equipment, or how does that work?
Well, it's a little bit bigger deal. It's a little bit bigger cost
Yes.
because we got to go in every room. We have to pull all that baseboard out. We have to drain the system down. We have to put new baseboard in, put new air purge valves in, put new convectors in classroom 1. All of that has to be done. So, yeah, but again, the baseboard should be fairly readily available. I would say 2 or 3 weeks to actually buy the baseboard. And then, again, it's going to be a little bit longer because they got to do some, a lot more work up in the building, but probably 2, 3, 4 weeks, I would say, to install that. It's not a huge project.
Okay, so about 2 months?
Yeah, I would say.
Okay. Keep going. This is the windows and the vents, I think, and insulating the ceiling. I think that's the next thing.
Yeah. So let me keep going now. Next is the office area. And when I walked this building originally, I didn't have a maintenance person with me. So I wasn't able to get my question answered, but there are ceiling vents in the office area, down where the principal's office, secretary, that office area. And I was curious as to what they were connected to, and nobody was able to answer my question. Fortunately, Leo was there yesterday, and it turns out that those vents aren't connected to anything. I believe that ductwork was run above that ceiling when that hung ceiling was put in that area for a future, possibly central air conditioning system. But what happens is the ductwork is run above that ceiling, and then it gets run into the attic area, and then it just stops. It's wide open.
Yeah.
That's to nowhere. Okay.
So what's happening is the hot air that rises up to the ceiling goes out that vent, and it goes up into the attic and out of the building because the attic is unheated. So we're losing a lot of heat through those vents. So some of them are kind of closed. There are little dampers on them. And I saw that the dampers were closed, and that will eliminate, some of the air going up there, but there's certainly going to be air leakage. So our recommendation is that the district just go in there and seal those up and seal the space that goes up into the attic. Just take some plastic and some tape and just cover that over so that we're not losing that air up into that area. So I didn't carry a cost for that because I think that's something the district can do very easily with their staff. It's a pretty simple project, but I think we might be losing a lot of our heat out of that section of the building up and out into the attic and then up and out of the building.
Right. If we seal that up, then I can see how that would help with heat. Would that have any effect on the ventilation in that space then?
Well, there is no ventilation in that space either. What you have there is operable windows. There is no piece of mechanical equipment that's bringing in fresh air.
But is there, I don't remember, it's been so long. Open windows over there, I guess it goes through the, for the airflow.
It could, it is creating a little bit of an airflow because it's acting like a gravity exhaust system. But what happens is that you have that doorway there and the vestibule with the visitor's entrance and security entrance, and then people come into the building. So as that door opens and closes, the hallway gets cold. And then everybody in those rooms has to close their doors because the hallway makes them cold. So they leave their doors closed in order to keep their rooms warm enough. So my fear is that, you're sucking all of that heat out of there when it's really cold out. It's going to continue to make that space cold. Now, the fact that we're going to replace the circulator, there's a lot of baseboard. down in that area. Like the principal's office and the secretarial office have two full walls, two outside walls are lined with hot water baseboard. There's plenty of heat in there. We're just not getting the flow in that piping in order to get the heat out of the hot water that's coming out of the boiler room. So it very well might be more than enough heat, and then you could open those back up and create a little bit of an exhaust system, a gravity exhaust system. But my fear is if you're fighting to get heat in there, you certainly don't want it going out through the attic. Doesn't make a lot of sense. So you can always open that back up again if we find out we have a lot of heat. You could leave it open during the shoulder season, so the spring and the fall, but certainly during the winter, if you're struggling to heat that area, especially because people are coming in and out of that door and letting cold air in and out, and it's making the people in the offices cold, I would recommend closing them up at least temporarily during the colder parts of the year.
It's just we have the two simultaneous concerns, heat and ventilation. So
Ventilation.
maybe this is a space that we would want to put a small one of those small filter fans in there.
Right.
Improve the
And
ventilation.
some of those rooms have windows. Let's see, the center room on the left-hand side, which is, I think, Debbie's room, does not have windows. It's an interior space. But the custodial office and then the front office have windows, and then the principal's office and the secretarial office has windows in them. So they have the ability to do that. And I will tell you, I'm kind of skipping ahead, but one of the problems that we have in that building is that the windows are problematic for a couple of different reasons. Number one, they're replacement windows. So the windows were replaced, I don't know, I can't tell how long ago, maybe 15, 20 years ago. They're relatively modern, but they're double hung. So there are things called balances in the sides of the windows that allow the windows to operate up and down so that they're not too difficult, too heavy to lift up or too hard to pull down. The balances are shot. So those windows need to be repaired so that they are made operational again, because I tried to operate most of the windows in that building, and the windows themselves seem fine, but the balances are just in really rough shape. And you can buy replacement balances. It's not a hard thing to do, and replace those balances. The other thing is that Leo had mentioned that the windows get drafty. And the windows that have the window air conditioners in get really drafty. And, I think Debbie had mentioned that they get covered with plastic during the winter when it's real cold. So what we're recommending is that those windows get sealed. So they need to be caulked, they need to be sealed, they need to have the hardware repaired. They don't need to be replaced because, again, they're relatively modern and they're decent windows, but they definitely need some work, so that you would be able to open those windows and get ventilation, not just in those offices, but really in the whole building. They need attention. Some of the windows, the balance is completely shot. You lift the window up and the window comes crashing down. So obviously, we need to fix that. That's not a safe condition. Others, you can't even open the window because the balance is kind of popped out and it's wedged sideways in there, and it's impossible to really open the window fully. So we have a lot of things going on with the windows, but definitely fixable. Need to reseal them.
I have a question from Mona Freitag.
Yeah. All of these projects, are we going to have to send them out to bid? Because that's going to increase the time frame.
Technically, that's up to the district. The answer is not necessarily. They don't have to necessarily have to go out to public bid, but if you can buy them off of a state or county contract that has already been bid, and I'm sure that's how Michael gets most of the work done in the district that he does.
Okay, thank you.
We put out a heating bid, and we have a contractor that does our heating systems.
Thank you, Michael.
Company called Window Repair Systems. I don't know if you work with them at all, Michael. I know they do that type of work too, but if you have somebody, that's great.
Yeah, that would be great, because otherwise the time frame just keeps getting longer and longer and longer for us.
Yeah, we don't have anybody that repairs windows. We have somebody who replace. We have a glazier. That's about it. I heard are they on state contract or is it county contract? The company you're talking about?
As far as companies, you mean, the window
No,
repair system?
The window repair, are they on a contract?
I
Because we
don't, I
don't have
think
a-
they are, yeah. And the name of the
that-
company is actually Window Repair Systems, and I think
Okay.
they might be up in Westchester County. I'll have to find out. Jim Waitig, do you know the answer to that?
Yeah, I don't think they're in New York. They're from, I deal with
Oh,
someone
they
in
relocated
Indiana.
today.
I don't know if they're on county contract, a state
I
thing,
I
whatever.
will, I will do a group chat, with other directors of facilities in Westchester County and ask them about that.
Yeah, I
We'll
can
find
send
out.
you,
Um,
I can
I'll
send you
let
the
you know,
contact
Michael.
information.
We'll let you know tomorrow. We'll find that out. They work in a lot of school districts. We see them around a lot. So I'm assuming that they have some sort of a contract that they're available off of, but I'm not 100% sure, but we will check.
Okay.
Okay, so let's see, there's the windows, talked about the ceiling registers. Okay, so next is insulation. So one of the things that we couldn't determine, just scroll up a little bit. Yeah, thank you, Jim. Is that you have sheetrock ceilings in most of that building. You have hung ceilings in the office areas, and we can't tell if there's insulation above that sheetrock ceiling. We don't believe that there is. I think in asking Michael that question, he wasn't sure. He did not believe there was either, but I'm not 100% sure. And the reason that that's important is because the attic space is unheated, and it's going to be pretty darn close to whatever the outside air temperature is. So if all of you have is a piece of sheetrock between you and the outside, you're going to lose a lot of heat through that. So all of our heat rises, it stays up at the ceiling, and then it gets transferred up into the attic area and out of the building. So want to double check. And the problem is that the whole attic is floored. So it's got beautiful wide wood planking up there from when it was originally a carriage house. That was the hayloft area, and there were some other rooms up there. So you can't see what's in there. And the bottom part is sheetrock, and so I can't tell what's above the sheetrock and below the wood. But I think if we can confirm that, what we would do is probably blow in insulation, cut holes in the wood up above, and just use blown in insulation in there, which will reduce the heat loss to those spaces and through the ceiling dramatically. Again, this is something that we could hold off on if you didn't want to do it right away. And if we can get the heat putting out enough heat the way it should be doing, it might be a non-issue. Yes, you're still going to be losing heat up through the ceilings, but we might be able to more than compensate for it. So I don't know. Again, this is one of those things
Is
that's
this
not
energy performance contract stuff?
an energy performance contract would absolutely be able to do that. So we could work that in the EPC.
Okay. Keep going.
Okay, let's see. Next up, it's interesting, is the resource room. Oh no, wait a minute, so the rear hallway. So there's the little rear hallway that goes from room 2 back to the nurse's office, resource room, that area back there. And I walked in there, and there's a piece of baseboard, hot water baseboard on the wall. And when I was talking to Leo, he said, well, we don't get any flow through that. That's not connected to the boilers, which made no sense to me until I spoke to Michael. And Michael said, well, that's actually not hot water baseboard. They just put baseboard enclosure in there to use it as a chase to get the domestic hot and cold water from the bathroom that's in the hallway back to the nurse's office sink. So it looks like there's hot water baseboard there, but it's not. It's just got hot and cold water lines running in it to get back to the nurse's office. So it kind of faked me out. There is a small section of electric baseboard in there, but it's nowhere near big enough to make up the heat that you're losing out of that space. So that hallway becomes very cold in the winter. And as a result, it makes all of the surrounding rooms very cold in the winter. Nurse's office primarily, but also the rooms that are on the other side of the hallway there. So what we're recommending is that we put an electric unit heater back in that area. You have several of those throughout the building. Some are more functional than others. We put one back there that's a little high output. The challenge in that building is finding electric. I think, as Michael had mentioned at the last meeting, we have a 225 amp service, which you would say, well, that's big enough. That, you know, that should be able to handle that building. But you have a lot of electric heat in here. That wing, I'll call it, that comes off of the back of the building there is not connected to the boilers. It has only electric heat back there. So what we're recommending is that, you know, a hot water unit heater be installed. We're going to have to play around. There are several electrical panels in that building, all fed off of the 225 amp main. So we would have to figure out where we have to go back to in order to pick up a circuit to run that heater. But you know, we think that there's going to be capacity in there somewhere. We're just going to have to find the right circuit breaker panel to tie into. So the price on that, again, $15,000, including all contingencies and fees. The resource room was also cold, as reported to us, and that whole, again, that only has one small section of electric baseboard. And that either needs a high output baseboard or, again, a unit heater. So again, the cost in there would be $15,000. The
Fred.
kitchen has no heat. Yeah.
I just want to make everybody aware of the area you're talking about, and that's why we leave the door on room 2 open at all times, because the area he's talking about that goes to the nurse's office, the pipes froze there 3 times. 3 times we had a flood. The last time it was a big flood and the asbestos tile floor ended up coming up, and I had to do an asbestos removal. So that's the area that Fred is talking about, the walkway going towards the nurse. And as he said, that cold air penetrates into the classroom.
Right. The kitchen has no heat in it, which is amazing. I guess it relies on the heat that gets thrown off by the large refrigeration units that are in there. But it has no source of heat. So again, we got to put something in there, probably an electric unit heater. So it's another $15,000 for that. And then we get into some of the questions that Debbie had brought up last time and sent out in an email. So there was mention that the nurse's office and teacher's room smell of mold. And when I got there, they smell musty. So we had an item in our report before to add drainage to the rear of that building. But I think even before that gets done, at the very least, it kind of pitches toward the building in that point. So you have runoff coming down and sitting up against the side of the building. It'll get absorbed into the wall. It'll find whatever its way in through cracks. So, you know, we would recommend that you just go out there and re-pitch that. And, you know, you might have to spend a little bit of time just digging it out so that you can pitch that area back away from the building for 2 or 3 feet so that you don't have that water coming into the back of the building. And then, you know, obviously you'll have to bring a mold remediation firm in and have them just double check that area and take care of anything that they see. I didn't see any active mold in there when I was there, but it definitely does smell musty. So
all right, my assumption is that we should run the same process that we ran for the other schools to try and make sure that there's enough air circulating. I mean, when we do our initial fixes and we've got enough heat, and then we put our fans in, we do what we did in Bailey, right? And so we go through that testing to make sure that.
Yeah, we have an outside company that does our landscaping.
Okay.
So we would have to hire that out, figure out how much it would cost to do that.
Okay.
Can I just go back to when we were talking about putting in the electric heat in those 3 areas? I think last meeting, I don't know if it was Deborah or someone else said that they've tried that. They've tried plugging in things in the past and the fuses have blown. Are we just saying that we need to we have enough amps in the building overall, we just need to find where to plug things in basically, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that happens in the office area where if they plug in a couple electric heaters and, they have the computers on it, it trips a circuit in there. So we have to find the circuits that are not overloaded. And I also believe that, once we get the hot water baseboard working properly, we're going to be able to turn off some of the existing electric heaters that are in that building that are used to supplement right now. And therefore, we won't have that amperage draw on the main or on the panels that they are on. So I think we'll be able to switch it over to these other areas that don't have adequate heat because they're not on the boiler plant. So we can't do anything boiler wise to help those spaces out, but we can put some supplemental electric heat in there. And something like baseboard is fine, but it's got a very long recovery time. It takes a while to heat that space up. If you go with a unit heater, it's a much faster recovery time. So it'll heat that space up much more quickly. And that's what, definitely that hallway in the kitchen, I would say would need something like that. The resource room, we might be able to get away with, some additional electrical baseboard, but definitely not those other two areas.
I am by no means an expert in this area, but you so I'm having a hard time understanding. You quote roughly 15,000 for each of those three areas. And in my mind, in my house, if I'm just trying to figure out which plugs can I plug in the air conditioner and the microwave at the same time and they won't blow. I mean, in my head, I'm translating that to what needs to be done to get heat to those three areas. Or what part am I missing that costs 15,000 for putting?
So again, remember these are loaded numbers, so it's probably $10,000 or $11,000 actual construction cost. But I'm assuming worst case scenario that we're going to have to go back to the panel that's in the office area, all the way on the other end of the building, and now we're going to have to try and run the circuit from there above the ceilings, somehow snake it above there, or go up into the attic, or I'm not sure how we're going to run those circuits, honestly. And then get those circuits down to those other areas. You got to buy the heater, you got to install the heater, you have to put controls on it, so it has to be a thermostat that gets mounted. All of that has to be done, all the sheetrock work, all the repair work. So it just adds up. Now, if we can grab it much closer at a closer electrical panel, that's great. It'll save you guys some money and it won't cost that much. But we have to make sure we budget for worst case scenario, because if I tell you 15 and it comes in at 20, that's not good, because then you didn't budget enough money for it. So, they're conservative, but remember, it's also prevailing wage. That everything school district does has to be prevailing wage, bonds, insurance, the whole thing. So it just definitely costs much more money. It's, the labor rate is at least double the labor rate of a private project typically.
Fred, I have your hand up. I keep seeing this golden hand raised. Is that left over, or you've been waiting to speak? Mona? I guess not. Okay.
David?
Go ahead.
I just had one question for Fred. So you're saying it's actually two buildings. So you're saying the electrical in our building and the administrative building is the same electrical that's in the building next door to us where the classrooms are? That's all connected? It's not separate?
That's what was described to me, and that's what it looks like. So there's a big panel in that hallway in the administrative building there.
Yes.
And that panel feeds all of the other panels that are over in the classroom building. And there are probably, I don't know, I didn't count them, 5 or 6 or 7 panels. Some are really tiny, old screw-in type fuse panels, honestly. It was kind of nice that I was with Leo because he knew what they actually fed. But there's one in the nurse's office. There's, they're all over the place. They're kind of hidden. You really have to look for them. But they are all fed from that 225 amp panel. That's your understanding as well, correct, Michael?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay.
Mona, did you have a question?
I had a question.
Go ahead, Ashley.
So just out of curiosity, I know you're proposing electrical for that. Is there a reason we couldn't? I'm obviously there's a reason. I'm just curious to know what the reason is why we couldn't just add it to the hydronic system.
We could. The problem is that all the piping for the hydronic system goes underground. And it's slab on grade, so we can't get to it. So it would cost a lot more money to try and pull it off the hydronic system. We also don't know what's on what loop, how exactly it runs. So it's just easier at this point to add electric heat, but you're right. I mean, we could do it on the hydronic end, but it's just more difficult to do because we don't have any drawings of that building. So we'd be guessing at where the piping runs to try and tap into it and then run up into the ceiling and then over to a hot water unit heater or something like that. So that's the only reason why I did electric, and just easier and quicker to do right now. And that's kind of I thought our goal is to get this building, ready for September. So I kind of went, a little bit on the easier, quicker side in that one. But we could look at hydronic if that's something you're interested in.
No. You're on the right track. I was just curious, so thank you for explaining it.
Yeah, I had this whole thing of should we be running more pipes from the front? Yeah, okay, go ahead.
It's kind of hard to run into that back wing. And as he said, there's no attic on that, on the area where I told you the pipes froze. There's just a small little cavity. Technically, you can try to go high. There's no insulation up there whatsoever. It's very drafty because when that ceiling came down, there's not much up there. I mean, it's possible, but otherwise everything else, it's slab. You can't probably get into the walls. That would be the only area.
Understood. Thank you.
So the next thing that was raised was that there were rodents in the building. It was interesting as I was sitting in the administrative area hallway there talking to Leo. I actually heard a squirrel, I think, up in the attic, or up in the, not in the attic, in the ceiling, kind of moving around up there. So he had mentioned that they have had squirrels in that building from time to time. They've also had mice in there. He said, but sometimes some of the food wasn't stored in plastic containers, so the mice were able to get into it. So, again, I'm just recommending that you call in a professional exterminator. You trap the squirrels, you relocate them, and then with the mice, again, same thing. You just, trap them, get them out of there. I mean, it's hard with that building because it's in the middle of the woods. So you're kind of in their turf right now, so to speak. And it's not a new building. There are a bazillion ways in for a critter if he wants to find his way into that building. And I'm sure during the winter, it's a lot warmer in there than it is outside. And so it's not hard for them to find their way in. It would be very hard to try and rodent-proof a 100-year-old building like that. But definitely call in an exterminator professional and have them, take care of that and trap them and get them out of there.
Every time we find a hole, I mean, the fascia board is rotted out, the soffits are rotted out. It's just like the mansion is that we put just pieces of plywood. We try to cover up every hole we can.
Yeah, you're fighting a losing battle. I mean, it's
Some of
a
the
tough,
building condition survey items are to replace some of that stuff, right?
yeah. And then the last item that was brought up was Deborah had mentioned that the sink in classroom 3 didn't have hot water. And I was talking to Leo and he said, well, it has hot water. He said, but we shut it off because there were complaints that they were afraid the kids were going to burn themselves. So he said, there's water in there. So there's a couple of things we can do. We can either install a tempering valve that'll mix hot and cold water so that you'll get warm water out of that faucet. Or if possible, we might be able to lower the water heater set point downstairs, so that does not happen. So if you're going to install a mixing valve or a tempering valve, I showed a loaded dollar amount of $4,000 in there. If you're going to just lower the temperature in the water heater, which, you're not supposed to have more than 105 coming out of, a faucet that impacts a student. You could do that as well. The other thing that was mentioned is that the water heater is actually shut off right now because there's a valve leak down there. So I recommend that the district just get in there and repair that valve and turn the water heater back on. So That's basically it. Those are all of my findings and recommendations. If you have any additional questions that you'd like to
So,
ask.
what's the longest pole in the tent? What's the item in there that takes the longest to complete? I haven't heard anything so far that's been over 2 months. Is there?
No, I would say no. There's nothing in here that would take over 2 months. All of this is fairly readily available. And once you decide what you want to do and undertake at this point, I can work with Michael. We can come up with some quick descriptions of the scope of work, kind of like we did on Bailey on that unit up in the attic area there. And then he can go to local contractors and get pricing, and they can submit shop drawings to us. We'll review and approve them and get them started.
Okay. Thank you. Are there other questions? Mona, do you have your hand up?
So let's just total up those
Go ahead.
dollars, David, so we know what might need to change in phase one, or if we have current monies in the repair, not the repair reserve, like in our, if some of this work needs to be done by our construction company on contract, I don't know what I'm talking about.
Right. I add up all the numbers. I've got 234, but yeah, go ahead.
Nope, you were on it.
I've got 234, but if we don't end up needing the baseboard, then it goes to 134. So, so then the question will be paying for it, right? And then the next item that we have is our financial status, because Lisa Raymond has been working on finding any additional money she can to see how much money we have in total. And I think she found a little bit more money. Do we want to go on to that, or are there other questions for Fred before we move on to the next item? All right, hearing none. Lisa.
Yes.
Can you tell us, I believe you have a spreadsheet for us to look at?
Right. Can you put that up?
Let me see what I can do here. Meeting 311, phase 2 scope descriptions. Okay, I've got it. Now I just have to figure out how to share the screen. Okay, share screen. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Take it
Okay.
away, Lisa.
Okay. So after the last meeting, I went back and I thought about the comments and the questions that came from the committee, and I decided that I was going to try to delve into the numbers a little bit more, the numbers and the history. So if you start with the repair reserve at June 30th, 2020, there's $1,611,827 in that account. Of those funds, $286,370 has been earmarked for additional mansion roof repairs. And at the time, it was labeled that the Highview and LF Jackson exterior doors were also part of the repair reserve. I have since found that there is no resolution that was made to do the exterior doors, so that money can be added back to be used for any future projects. So I added that back, one, because it wasn't part of a resolution, and two, in trying to find all the monies that would be available for a capital project phase one. So if you take out the mansion and roof repairs, you have available $1,325,457. Then the green section is the capital fund. We know that from our external audit that there were 6 projects that were identified with no activity in the 2019-2020 school year. Of those 6 projects, in speaking with Mr. Falcone, it was determined that 5 of those 6 projects have already been completed. And here are the 5 projects: the campus consolidation, the fire alarm system in the high school, the public address system in the high school, emergency boiler and electric repairs in the high school, and the water main and boiler. So that nets to $328,424 of projects that had been completed and done that is now available to be used. On top of that, combined in their numbers in the external audit report was the money that has already been spent on smart schools. So to date, $29,664 has been spent on designing a project for smart schools from a previous architecture and engineering firm. Now we have a little more than $471,000 that we will be able to spend from smart schools, which will be done for the high school vestibule. But that number is not added here because in order to utilize smart schools money, you have to spend the money and then apply for it to get reimbursed. So to date, the district has paid out the $29,664, which came from the capital fund. In 2019-20, through the budget process, there was a capital interfund transfer of $1,300,000 for mansion roof repairs. So I show that it is in the capital fund, but I also earmark it so people will know that those monies aren't available for any future projects or phases for phase 1. Okay, I'm just showing you that the money is there. Then in 2020, 2021, the current budget that we're in during the budget process, in the budget was $1,331,000. And what was earmarked for that was the 3 playgrounds, the ECP playground, the Highview playground, and the RJB playground. Okay. The RJB playground, the cost is being shared with the town. The town has agreed to pay $75,000 towards that. We have designed that project and we now know what the price of that is going to be. So the $75,000 will offset the cost of $172,419. So that leaves from that transfer, $1,001,170 that could go to a future capital project. In 2018-19, the board assigned, the board through the fund balance designated monies that was called assigned to future capital projects, set it aside in fund balance as an appropriation of $2,222,243. Recently, the board had a resolution to do the HVAC repairs to cost up to $750,000 in all the different schools. So that would leave $1,472,243 that is still available to be used for a capital project.
Mike, wait, Mike, has that $750,000 been depleted? Mr. Falcone?
I know that we're currently doing work. I'm not sure if all of it is finished yet, but I can look into that, definitely.
Okay, good.
And then in the proposed 2021-2022 budget, we're proposing to put another $1.3 million into the capital fund, and that will specifically be designated for the phase 1 capital project that will be proposed. So from the capital fund, money that is available that hasn't been earmarked and or spent would be $4,072,173. Combine that with the repair reserve money, we have $5,397,630 that can be applied to phase 1 capital projects. I am also in the process of speaking with our school attorney and our external auditors. And tomorrow, we have a meeting where we're all going to come together to figure out how we get all of this money into one pot, okay? So to say, oh, well, why don't you just transfer the money, Lisa, into one bank account? It's not that easy. It's going to take a couple of resolutions by the board to bring back some of this money to the general fund, and then we will then appropriate the money because it's already there. The taxpayers already know about it. We'll appropriate the money and let the taxpayers know, here is the amount of money, the $5,397,630, that we would now like to apply to these projects. Capital project that we're calling phase one. If you want to do ECP repairs, if there's money left over here, and anything else that, you know, comes up or may develop.
What I'm seeing right there is that you've got 5.3, almost $5.4 million. And we just came and we had a project at $5.1 million. So our $234,000 of additional expenses, you could pull out of the repair reserve fund and still cover our project. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so
Correct.
we're
What we're one of my main concern and one of the most critical pieces right now is that we need to start advertising. As you know, when you have a budget vote, you have to advertise 4 times in your publication of record that's designated at the annual meeting. The reorganizational meeting in July. That first publication has to get in April 3rd, and the paper needs to have it 4 days before. So our meeting next Tuesday is the critical date for me to get all of this resolved with our auditor and our attorney to get the proper wording for the proposition to go to the taxpayers. Then the other critical piece will be that before June 30th, the board will have to make a resolution to bring these monies back to the general fund. And then the proposition will state, here's what we want to do with those monies. It's going to go to phase one. It's going to go to, you know, handicap ramp. It's going to go to ECP, what have you, so that they know that when they vote, they'll know what they're voting on.
okay. So we have, as far as I can tell, one outstanding issue, and that is that I believe it was the question at the last meeting was, my goodness, we have the $575,000 or at least $500,000 going towards ventilation, permanent ventilation fixes at ECP. I believe Tanya Drogic came back and said, well, if we're possibly going to go forward with a bond anyway to move the kids to a new wing, why should we spend that $500,000 on ventilation on this building? Okay. And of course, depending on how the economy rebounds, and things are looking pretty good right now, then a year from now, we might be looking at a $5, $10, or even $15 million bond. And if we go to 15, I would say that we should consider putting that ECP wing in. So the question in the short run is, are we better off leaving the $500,000 in our $5.1 million proposal, or should we pull it out? Because we might not end up in the ECP building for forever. What do other people think? Sure, Jessica Mulden.
I think this is an important conversation we've been having about this money, but I guess my main concerns are, would this building be able to be used in September? And if it's not, what's the plan for ECP? And to let you know that parents of potential ECP students are ready to walk. They're getting really nervous with that information. So I think it's critical to know what is the plan for ECP and communicate that to new parents. But the other is, even if this space is not used for ECP, could it be used once the new wing is built, if it is built, for something else? are there STEAM programs that are in there? Could the district rent it out to the community? Could the PTA use it? You have the garden across the street. So it may not be an ECP space, but could it be used for something else?
Well,
so I think-
Jessica,
yeah.
I can tell you, and it's only been prematurely spoken about. We have at the district with Mr. Falcone and some other administrators have spoken about, we really need a central storing facility similar to like a shipping and receiving. And we had thought that if a wing is built onto one of the elementary schools for ECP, would we be able to utilize that whole building, or at least a partial portion of that building for shipping and receiving, so that we can control where everything is delivered and control our inventory? So that was just one thought that had been thrown out, has not really been discussed with anybody. But I think that building definitely could be used for many different things.
And then that gets to, this isn't just money that's being thrown away. It's helping us get to being able to use the space in September. We don't know when or if that bond will pass, and so you might need it in a year or two.
Oh, sorry. So you're leaning towards keeping the money in. Okay.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point of view. Katie, what do you think?
I agree with Jessica. I agree that we should keep the money in, especially if now that I'm hearing from Lisa, like, yes, there's already talk of ideas of if ECP was able to move out to Jackson eventually with a bond passing. Like Jessica said, I agree. It wouldn't be considered thrown away money because that building would still be used. I feel like I had one other thought, but I'll come. But basically, I think it's too much of a gamble to say like, oh, well, the bond's going to pass for the LFJ.
Okay.
But I also just wonder, like Jessica said, I mean, you guys got to be really sure that the ventilation is going to improve with the fans and the heat, so that when I assume you'll do like you did at Bailey, a before and an after, before letting the kids in. And if that doesn't work, a plan B, whether that's not having as many kids in ECP next year, just having the LFJ kids, or, I mean, I don't know, commercial space, is that an option? I know when you guys vacated the mansion, there was briefly like looking into it, but I think education, it was too difficult. So
I think if you put a big enough fan in, that you can get the ventilation. And the question was not, can we get the ventilation where it needs to be? We'll do what we have to do that. But will you freeze to death as a result of what we did for your ventilation? So I think we've got it, but did any experts want to chime in on that? And then we'll go to Chris. Yeah. Fred?
What's the question? I'm sorry, if we can get enough heat in there?
The question is, can we get enough, are we just about guaranteed that we can get enough ventilation in there as long as the heat can keep up?
Well, I think we can bring ventilation in there. Again, it's going to be like Bailey. You're not going to be able to put a window fan in there and blow 10-degree air in the middle of January and expect to heat that space. It'll heat the space, but the baseboard doesn't recover quickly, so it's going to take some time. So yes, you can open the window when it's real cold out and get some ventilation air in there, and you can put a fan in the window when it's not real cold out, when it's 45 or 50 or above, and you'll be able to heat that space. So I think basically you can do in that building what you're doing right now, or what you did this past winter at Bailey.
Okay, so I think that's not as robust a yay as I'd like to hear, but it's good enough from my perspective, I think. Chris, what do you think?
I apologize in advance because I have multiple points and questions. I agree with what Katie and Jessica are saying, and to piggyback on what Fred was saying, it'd be great. Again, we think most of the work won't take longer than 2 months once whatever go ahead needs to come from whoever. And I think I'd like that defined tonight. Who needs to say yes so it can begin? But So
Public
if we
hearing.
have like an estimated date on when to do that ventilation testing, so that can be communicated to the potential ECP parents as soon as possible. You know, we don't want to wait until August if we don't have to, because they're actively making decisions about where to send their kids next year. So I just want to emphasize that point that Jessica made.
Okay.
I have a question for Lisa. None of this work, right, or anybody actually, none of this work that we're talking about in ECP or phase 1 is capital. Is any of it reimbursable by the state for our paltry 10%? You're muted. You're muted. Sorry.
The work for where,
For
Chris?
ECP specifically right now.
If work is done, well, yeah, no, if work is done at ECP and children are gonna get back into there, then yes, we would submit it for state aid.
Okay, how long, you'll see where I'm going in a second. How long do we, to get that reimbursement from the state, how long do students need to be using that building?
I don't think that I'd have to check, but I don't think that there is a time frame. You have to remember when you go and when you're doing any of these projects and you want to get aid on it, the project has to be completed, and then all the paperwork has to be filed, and there are timing deadlines in order to get the funding or to get the aid. If you miss one of those timing deadlines, it could push you out for 18 months. The state is SED is very stringent. They've really tightened up their rules on how you do things. And that all stems back from years ago when they were offering money for people to do improvements, to add buildings, to add wings, and they were offering an additional 10%. They never expected the number of schools that would apply for money and apply for this aid. So then they put in more stringent rules. So I don't think, I think as long as students are in there, even if it's like just for a year, because it is improvements being made on a building that is for education and to house the students, it would qualify for the aid.
Okay, and just to be clear, the aid isn't on the boiler repairs and the window fixes to get us in the building in September. You're talking about the 575 for the mechanical ventilation, or would all of this qualify?
No, all of it would qualify. It just goes under different categories.
Okay,
I would
so
think
that takes away one.
Go ahead.
the projects would have to be submitted to the state in order to qualify for state aid. So any of
Right.
the repair work that we would just try to do to immediately get students in would not be aidable.
Right.
Okay.
Okay,
Timing.
thank you for that. Okay, so then, and I guess, I don't know, then do we need to decide, David, if the committee or the board is willing to forfeit that 10% of that aid to get us in there for September? I vote yes, if we need to make a decision tonight. Sorry, I told you I had multiple points, so.
I can see, yeah, and Steve's very patient, so keep going.
Okay.
Finish out, finish your list.
So then if students don't have to be in there for a minimum of, X years, if we were then to later build a wing, again, we're not going to forfeit the money for the
You have to give it back.
phase 1 project, that reimbursement, because the kids will have been in there using it for educational space. Here's where I'm
Right.
going with that now. Let's say we build a wing. Another alternate use for the ECP building, and I know that's not the focus tonight, but could be that's where we put admin. We pull them out of the high school, put them in the newly ventilated ECP building while we later work on the mansion after we do a wing or something. I'm saying we can shift people around because now that will be a safer building than the mansion. And it will also free up space in the high school. I don't want to dwell on that, but it's another alternate use
Yep,
as a stopgap.
there are many
Okay.
possibilities.
Okay, sorry. And
Modulars,
two more
many
things.
possibilities. Yep, okay.
Two more things. You said earlier that you did some math on what these things added up to on the email. Leaving out the baseboard work, I come up with 145, and that doesn't include the exterminator or the mold remediation. I just
Oh,
want to clarify, does this money is not included in phase 1. This is money we probably have on hand and need to check and verify we have this on hand to begin the work now?
If you pull it out of the repair reserve fund, then you have to have a public hearing on it. If you're sitting on 5.3 million, almost $5.4 million, then you probably have the required funding. You just have to specify what it's for and have a public hearing on it. And then the board can pass a resolution.
So the soonest we, if we then need, so the soonest we can start this is we have to give notice that we're having a public hearing. So we're talking May, because you have to give your notice here in March, you do the public hearing in April, maybe you can begin in late April or May. Correct? Is that how this works?
Right, the public hearing would be with the, combined with the annual hearing for the budget vote.
And this, I'm just talking about the boiler and the windows, nothing about phase one. I'm talking about these repairs on the email. Still needs that hearing to get the money out of it.
If you're taking money out of a repair reserve, you have to have a hearing, a public hearing.
And we can't take this money out of the money set aside.
So May plus 2 months, you're at the end of the school year.
Okay.
Not September.
I'm
July.
just saying, we also have that money assigned to future projects that isn't really a capital reserve.
The money that's set aside in fund balance it's assigned for capital projects. The board could, the board passed a resolution to use the 750. They could probably, I'd have to check with the
Resolution and
attorney.
Pull stuff out of general funds.
Right, I'd have to check with the attorney, but I'm thinking that if they did a resolution, they could pull it out of there.
Okay. Sorry, I don't know who froze me or you guys, but
Okay, okay. So are we good?
I know one more thing, my last point.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm sorry. And then just to make sure we have money for everything. We haven't mentioned the money we need that's not been earmarked anywhere for a ramp once the new vestibule's put in.
Correct. So, the plans for the vestibule, are almost ready to be submitted to SED for approval. So that has to go through that process, which could take a couple months. And then we would have to, once those are approved and once Fred and Jim do whatever it is that they need to do to answer questions, then we would have to go out to bid. And I'm sure that will not happen within this school year. So it was my intention or my thought, as I had expressed to David, if we, with one of the propositions at budget time is going to be if there's anything over 4% in fund balance that can be held, that excess goes to the repair reserve, as happened this school year, that those monies be earmarked for the handicap ramp.
And would it then be earmarked for the Highview and Jackson doors that we just took out of earmarking?
No, my thought was, I mean, you could do that, but if we are going to do different phases of capital projects as we accumulate money, I thought that the replacement of exterior doors at those two elementary schools would be included in one of the phases.
So phase 2. So let's ask the architect. Is the replacement, I think in some cases you're making the doors wider. Is that true for handicapped access? Is that something that can go in phase 2?
Right now, we don't have, we have very little money for a door replacement in phase 2. There's a little bit of money in phase 1, and it's for some isolated doors, I believe at Bailey.
Okay.
And auditorium doors and stairway doors at Woodman's.
So what I'm asking is there any rule that says before doing any work on any other portion of a particular building, do you have to do, before working on the Highview roof, do you have to make those doors wider?
No, not right now.
Okay, good. Steve.
Wait. Were those doors monies paid for out of the Smart Schools Fund? Sorry.
No.
No.
Okay. I'm
No,
sorry.
the only thing that's in the Smart Schools Fund is the high school vestibule.
Okay.
It was originally technology money, which Carlos would have been happy to use. Then the legislature came back and said, well, you could use it for security too. Whereupon we pounced on it and said, let's put in a security vestibule because that appeared to be, it's a safety issue, right?
But I thought that technology money came from the smart schools.
Smart Schools money can be used for technology or security upgrades.
All right.
And we're-
Steve Martin.
I completely forgot what I was going to say about ECP because you bounced around the world. And I think I was going to piggyback on Jessica and Katie and what Chris said. But my concern is that we get out of focus. And I want this to really happen. We need ECP. It's pathetic that it ended up in this kind of condition. But I feel like Fred outlined what we need to do. And now it's up to the board administration to get off their butts and get this done. So we shouldn't piecemeal it by saying, should we buy one electric base for it? Just do what you got to do to get it open by September. This is what the people want. So don't piecemeal. If we need 500,000, find a way to find the money, get the money, get it done, and get it done properly.
Good. I think we can do that. Ashley.
I just wanted to give you my thoughts on this whole process. So the first thing that comes to mind is the question of the 500K for the long-term ventilation. I absolutely think we should move forward with that. I don't think it's a waste of money because, irrespective of all the other ideas that have been thrown out tonight, we did chat last meeting about the potential of building the ECP expansion wing on the existing ECP building. If we did that, then this whole conversation about the 500,000 being a waste of money is a moot point and it's gone, right? So that's the one thing in my mind. The second thing I was going to say is, I'm thinking back on the days when my daughter went through ECP, and I know we've talked a lot in length in the past about the transitions between the school buildings being a little bit of a hiccup sometimes. But I got to tell you, in my honest opinion, from my recollection, I would love to have all the ECP students in one building, I think like everyone else would. I don't have a preference though for it being LFJ. I would be totally fine with just making the ECP main building, expanding on it and making that the permanent home for them. And I wouldn't, thinking back on those days, I wouldn't be opposed to that wouldn't be a problem for me. So I think we should absolutely move forward with the 500 plus in the phase 1 for the ventilation. I additionally think that we should move forward as quickly as possible with the repairs we need to do to the heating systems and all that to get us at least at a good starting point for September.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm hearing that we keep the 575 in and we go forward as fast as we can to get that heating in. Anybody have a differing point of view? Very good. Okay, so I think as a result of what appeared to be a digression from Chris, we actually may have covered most of the agenda. Let me switch documents here and we'll confirm that. Okay, we went over the ventilation fixes. We figured out we have cost estimates. You can write those up and that can be part of the report to the board on Tuesday. Add them all up. The time estimate is that whenever we get going, it's not going to take more than 2 months to do the heating fixes that we need for the ECP main building. We think it won't have any effect on phase 1 because Lisa has managed to find enough money. So that's good. We do know that we need to have a public hearing. Financial status, you've gone over the repair and capital fund analysis. Woodlands Middle High School security vestibule. We're looking at money for that to come from what we have come out with in the past years from our Proposition 1, which is that the part that's not reimbursable from Smart Schools money, we may be able to get with the excess over 4% in fund balance. So again, no particular effect on phase one. Recommendations to the Board of Education. BBS, you're putting together a slideshow that will show in depth and detail both the energy performance contract and phase one. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and that will be ready for Tuesday.
Yes, so it will be the scope that we had sent you already, as well as trying to get some photos of the larger items that are in the phase one presentation.
Good, and a schedule. A projected schedule, milestones. Yes,
Okay.
good. Agenda and public hearing requirements. Lisa, you're working out what needs to happen. So in terms of an energy performance contract, what do we know what kind of resolutions we need? Do we need a resolution at the front end to authorize things, or is it just at the back end when we figure out what company we're going to?
My understanding that you only need a resolution when you figure out which company you're going with and you're actually going to make an award. At this point, all you're doing is putting an RFP out. You could put the RFP out on the street and get several responses back and decide not to move ahead. And then there's no cost or obligation to the school district. So you're not actually locking yourself into anything at this point. So I haven't seen it typically in the past where a school district has actually put a resolution forth. It was just a board vote real quick and decided to move ahead with the RFP. Later on, when you actually select one of the contractors and move ahead, then you would have to do a resolution.
And is it traditional for the Board of Education to review the candidates?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll just do that as part of a report on this meeting, and get the board to say yes, go ahead with the process, and then the resolution will come later. Good. So for phase one, yeah. So I assume that we have to have the public hearing before the board adopts the recommendation. Is that the order of the plan? Lisa? You're muted.
Can you say that again? It was all muffled.
My assumption is that for the phase one recommendation, what needs to happen is that the public hearing happens first and then the board adopts a resolution approving phase one?
No, it's my understanding that so according to the attorney, this is what we're going to discuss tomorrow. With
Okay.
the budget proposition is going to be the wording to bring the money back to the general fund, and in the
Okay.
same breath say this is what we're going to use it for, and then if that's approved, then
Then you're in the repair reserve fund and then you have the public hearing.
correct.
Okay, so
Which should
resolution,
happen at the
hearing,
end.
resolution. All right.
Right, which it's the intent to have the public hearing and the annual meeting all on the same night.
Okay, understood. Good. All right, I think that's it. Do other people have other concerns? Yes, Mr. Simon.
First of all, I apologize for being late. I was chairing another meeting, so I couldn't leave early. So maybe this was already answered, but what effect will the $1.9 trillion bill that was just signed have on the school district, or is that too early to know?
Yes, that's too early to know. We do know that New York State is getting billions of dollars, but how that is being divided up between education and all the other departments, we're not exactly sure.
Okay, thank you.
Chris.
So that was one of my questions. I know you recently submitted information to someone in government about our COVID costs. Did that include things like what we've spent on building repairs and what we estimate to spend on these ventilation repairs, so that if they're going to pick out ventilation items specifically, we might actually get funding for these, or is that not gone up to whoever?
Not at this time. The CARES Act money that the district is receiving which is separated into two different grants. One, we have to share that with private and parochial schools that are in our district and or with ones outside of our district if they want to participate, that we send our students to. That's number one. So all of the money that is designated for Greenberg doesn't actually come to Greenberg Central School District. And the monies that I have applied for to get reimbursed have already been spent.
Okay. Great.
So
Okay.
does the $750,000, say, for example, not count towards that?
Right, that was not, we spent more than the CARES money that we were receiving. So it had to be divided between cleaning PPE, which we used, cleaning supplies, the spray guns, masks, desk dividers, etc. And then the other half we spent on the technology that we needed to get for our staff and students in order to do remote learning.
Okay.
The other thing I want to ask is, I don't know if Mike is still on the phone, about the MERV filters. Donna asked on the email, I asked at the last meeting, when's the last time we've checked the filters to see if they need to be changed or see if we need to order more? Any update on that?
Yeah, I had our HVAC guy and I told him, I says, if they're really, bad to replace them. Okay. And he got back to me. He says they weren't bad at all. I think it's because of, minimum people in the building.
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of times we're not in the building, but no, they haven't been replaced yet. That was about 3 months ago. You asked, correct?
And I also asked at the last meeting a few weeks
Last
ago.
meeting.
So
Yeah,
just
I didn't
periodic
check it
schedule.
recently, but I checked it 3 months ago.
Okay, it'd be great if there was a schedule of we're checking them every 3 months or whatever it is, so that we're not leaving it to chance. And my last point is, I just want to reiterate what Steve and Jessica, everybody said. I know it only takes 2 months supposedly to get this work done at ECP, but the sooner we get it done, the sooner it can be communicated to parents who are making decisions about where to put their kids next year. So please don't think, oh, it's 2 months, that's a summer project. It'd be great if we can get it done sooner than that, get the ventilation tested to reassure parents that it's safe to put their kids there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
David, just to Chris's point, now that we have a plan, we can start working on, prepping our communication to the community of what the plan is. And then once, as a board, we approve it, I mean, we could just send that communication out so folks know, right? I don't think we have to wait for the project to be completed to do that.
You are correct. I actually have an outstanding request from Evelyn, who was trying to get involved with, she needs to put stuff in the newsletter by the 28th. So we will certainly work on communicating what we are doing. We have to make sure the board gets it before anybody else does, but that won't take very long.
Thank you.
To public. Any other comments or questions? Thank you, everybody. This has been a lot of work, but I think we're making good progress. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Everybody.